serving a life sentence for the 1988 murder of a 12-year-old girl wants a new trial.
A hearing in Rockland started today to consider a motion for a new trial for Dennis DeChain based on DNA evidence. DeChain was convicted of torturing, sexually assaulting, and strangling Sarah Cherry in a wooded area in Bowdoin.
Cherry was babysitting at a home when she disappeared. Her body was found 2 days later. Witnesses in today's hearing included experts from forensics labs in California and Texas who have reviewed the evidence.
The defense argues DNA evidence found under Cherry's fingernails did not belong to him, saying it could be another suspect. They say because the DNA testing excluded him from 3 of 6 pieces of evidence found at the crime scene, he is entitled to a new trial under Maine state law. Other items could not definitively include nor exclude DeChain.
Prosecutors argued the DNA was contaminated and say the rest of the evidence overwhelmingly links DeChain to the crime and called the defense arguments as simply their spin on it.
Dr. Rick Straub, formerly of Cellmark Forensics, was part of the re-examination of this case's forensic evidence back in 2012. In Straub's testimony, he said that he stands by past testimonies in this case in 2012 and 2013 and believes that new data found in recent evaluations of evidence confirm that contamination was actually not a concern.
We'll have more details from this hearing coming up at 6. It is set to continue tomorrow.